Oh, and one thing. There you go. Good morning for me. Good evening to the two of you.
Good evening. Well, late afternoon.
But late afternoon. Yeah. When would evening start? Is it when the sun goes down, or is there a certain time of day? I'm just out of curiosity.
I would say 6 o'clock, but actually looking out of the window, it is pitch black here already. So it's kind of like evening, if not night already.
Yeah, you had yours.
5 p.m. So yeah, official work's over officially. So I think that's evening to me. Right?
Well, work isn't over. I'm still here.
There you go.
And you had your I feel like daylight savings 3 weeks ago. We just had ours last Sunday. So it's one of those your heart just drops a little bit. It's like, oh cool, 1 hour less of sun. So
and when you work for a company like Microsoft, you then have that week where all of your meetings are messed up because Europe has changed, America hasn't, and then depending on who scheduled the meetings have moved around, and it's like this huge car crash of meetings. It's terrible.
Exactly.
We need an international treaty to coordinate the changeover.
I mean, it's last digression, and then we can get to the topic. Like, I personally have the opinion that I think we just get rid of it. Like, it's I think they've talked about like, statistically how much like depression goes up by quite a bit. The fall, it actually causes a statistical increase in car crashes because people are tired. Like it, quote unquote lost productivity of like a few billion globally, just from so I don't think it serves any purpose anymore that we need it for. Just go to like standardized time. Well, or like no switching of time zones. Yeah.
I think causes us a lot of issues doing data conversions in our databases as well. When you're converting to UTC, everything's off, for half the year. So I agree with you there, Reid.
I'm sure statistically, kind of simplified things like this, there would be at least one data engineer in the world, or kind of aggregated, that would lose their job simply because we'd simplified something like this.
If only we had technology to maybe do a coordinated process of this, But no, but yeah, thanks for coming back on, Chris. I think this is your third or fourth time we've done some type of a stream together. I think over the years.
Lost count. Yeah, but it's nice to be back. It's lovely to be here.
Yeah, first time on Analytic Endeavors too. Thanks to talk about some fun conversations with AI and everything, and especially now with all the stuff that Copilot's been doing, certainly. But I think, as we've always done, like good starting point is to maybe give you a chance to give a brief introduction about yourself, kind of what you do, who you are, before we segue into talking about the topic of the day.
Cool. So I am Chris Webb. I work at Microsoft on something called the Fabric Customer Advisory Team. Actually, well, it used to be called the Power BI Customer Advisory Team, then it became the Fabric Customer Advisory Team, and then I think technically now we're the Azure Data Customer Advisory Team. But I'm still on the Fabric side of things, and I'm very specifically a Power BI person. I wouldn't pretend to know about Fabric DW or anything like that. And in particular, I am very, very interested in Power BI Copilot. It's a hugely interesting topic, and something that customers are very, very interested in as well. Something that we on the CAT team spend a long time talking to customers about. So I'm here to kind of share the accumulated knowledge of the CAT team with everybody. Something I've been blogging about a lot. I suppose probably like you, Reid, I like to look at my my stats to see what people are interested in, what people aren't interested in. And I spent a long time over this summer, like weeks and weeks at a time, blogging about Copilot topics. And it was a very, very unpopular topic. Nobody was reading it. And I thought, okay, I don't care. They're not interested now. But in a couple of months, especially when they come back over to Christmas and their bosses are saying, hey, what about this Power BI Copilot thing? What do I do with it? And somebody's searching for content, they're going to find my blog and find all of those in-depth things. Things might have changed a little bit since I wrote them, because things are always changing. But I'm glad I got all of those things out of my system when I had the chance.
Well, that's one thing that I've actually found a bit interesting with and actually just thinking out loud on some of the stuff with AI is I feel like historically, normally if you were to like bucket fast changing and slow changing, fast changing is often UI, slow changing is usually the backend, the code. Like there's more of a bit of an evergreen like blog post you can write if you're writing about something in the language. Like there might be a new function that comes out, but it usually doesn't make the old thing wrong. It just maybe it's not the most efficient anymore. But the interesting thing with AI is it's like the UI is actually the one that's not really changing. It's just a text prompt. You ask a question and it's produces stuff, but it's actually the backend that's constantly changing. So it's the first time in a while that I kind of seen or that I can remember of a flip where it's the thing that's making the any article stale is not because the interface changes in any significant matter. It's just that the functionality is changing bi-weekly at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And the things that when you write about these things, and as I'm sure we will see in a moment with demos, you can never really be sure how the demo is going to go because things change and LLMs are variable, to put it like that. And when the back end is changing as well, that just leads to a lot of uncertainty and variability. And normally when I write about something on my blog, I kind of think, well, okay, if you do what I've done, you'll get the same results. It's not always the case. There are just a lot of things that can go on in between me writing a blog and somebody reading it that will mean they get slightly different results. But at least, I think on this topic, it's the ideas that count. It's the general themes. It's like, hey, you can do this and you do it roughly like this. And, if you play around with it yourself a little bit more, you'll get it working on your semantic model.
And my long shot hope is I'm imagining as Power BI with AI stuff, like as the report definition language, once the paint dries on that, I very much am excited to see what the crystal ball in like 2 to 3 years is going to show for that kind of stuff. Like, imagine something where you can have like Clippy hang out with you and you can just, talk to him or Copilot or whoever it is, and just be able to have conversations where, hey, on this page, can you be blah, 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 and you just watch the changes in real time would be something really cool. Because I think most our report's always the quality of a report is going to be based on the knowledge of a person. But like, I could probably speak for a lot of people that the navigating through the format pane or the on-object formatting, which I feel like is essentially dead at this point. Like it is not the easiest user experience to go through that stuff. So hopefully we get something like I ask a question and instead of clicky drag droppy, it's talky dooey or something like that.
Well, that's where we're heading. And, I suppose to go back to your point about things changing quickly, there are different streams. And, you see all the cool kids on LinkedIn and things. Well, I don't know, can you be a cool kid and be on LinkedIn? Maybe it's all relative. But, you see the cool kids on LinkedIn doing their MCP server demos. And certainly one of my colleagues, Rui Romano, has done some amazing demos at conferences and, watch this space. The kind of things you can do with MCP are really amazing. But, it's all quite technical. You've got to have Visual Studio Code. You've got to have GitHub Copilot. You've got to have all of these things, which are not difficult to set up, but there's still quite a lot of friction. I think what we want to do with Copilot and Power BI is what we want to do with Power BI in general. Just reduce the friction, make it easy, make it all out of the box. And that means that what you can do in Copilot lags a few months behind the state of the art. But it does mean that it's all going to be in one box. You don't have to worry about setting anything up. It should all just work. And it should be as easy to use as possible. So, I think we're getting there. And I'm really excited to see where we're going to be in 2 or 3 years' time, like you said, because I absolutely think we will be able to talk to Clippy or whoever and say, hey, Clippy, make my pie chart green. We can't do that yet, but I will show you how to change a pie chart to a bar chart a little bit later, because I can do that.
Well, and I remember back to your sequel. Was it this year's sequel or last? I think it was a year ago or 2 SQL bits ago where you had a power hour with Clippy, which was really entertaining as well, wasn't it?
Was it Clippy? I don't think it was. I'm not sure that was me. But then again, I can't remember everything I've done. Somebody showed me a presentation that, somebody messaged me the other day and said, "Hey, Chris, this presentation you did was really great." I clicked on the link and there was me on the video, and I couldn't even remember doing that presentation. Recognized some of the slides, but I had no recollection whatsoever. That's why it's always good to write things down in a blog or do a live stream, so you don't forget all these things.
Oh, I keep telling people like half a reason for a blog, and sorry to cut you off, Steve. It's notes for myself for later. Like I go back all the time. Like I don't remember what I did. Like, oh, that's the pattern. Cool, because I have a file saved from that.
Yeah, it's a good habit to get into, and I'm glad I got into that habit. One of the other things I like to do is cooking. I never ever write down recipes or what I've done. So I'll cook something really amazing, and then I'll think a couple of days later, what did I put in that? I can't remember. Oh, it was really nice, but now I can't even remember what I did. And then a couple of months later, I've forgotten I even cooked it, and it's all gone. It's lost forever. And my kids or my wife will say, "Oh, can you cook that again?" And it's like, this is why it's important to write things down. So you put it there.
The advice I was given when I first started blogging was from Mike Hardawat. He said, just blog for yourself, right? To learn and to remember, then share it and you help the community as well. And I think that's a really good way. And I think everyone who does it for a long time kind of follows that. So definitely, when you've been doing as much as Chris and so many sessions and you do a lot, I'm sure you forget some of them as well. You're very, very active.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you're ready to get started, we can flip over to the stage and kick it off.
Absolutely. So
there we go.
Copilot and Power BI. How do you get going with it? What can you do? First of all, things you're going to need. You are going to need a capacity. Most people with capacities now at this point will have fabric capacities, FSKUs. Don't get confused. You can do all of this with a PSKU if you still got a PSKU hanging around. So you will need a capacity, and then you will need admin privileges, and you will need to go to the admin portal and have a look at the Copilot related settings. And you will need to enable this setting. Users can use Copilot and other features powered by OpenAI. This is the master switch that turns things on and off. You can turn it on for everybody in your organization, or if you're doing a proof of concept, you can just turn it on for specific security groups. There are a few other options here, like the standalone Copilot that I'll show a little bit later. And the other important thing that you need to think about is this one, which is if you're outside the US or the EU, you will need to agree to send some data to the EU or the US. Now, I know this is a huge blocker for a lot of people. It's a huge blocker in the UK. Some people, if you read the documentation, it will tell you exactly what data would get sent out of your region. And a lot of customers are okay with that. Some people aren't. We are working to enable this for more and more people. But those are the two settings at the tenant level. What you will also find is that there is this capacity admins can enable or disable switch on here on the Copilot and Azure OpenAI, and the users can use Copilot function, which means that even if this has been turned off at the tenant level, if you're a capacity admin, you can go to a capacity, and we have a look at this one, and you can enable it at the capacity level as well. So there is a, where is it? It's going to be under, somewhere under here. There is a capacity level setting. It's not the Copilot capacity one that I'll go back to. It's
always hard to find stuff in there just because there's like a bagillion settings in these things.
Yes, exactly. There's a setting under here somewhere underneath one of these other ones. Oh no, what am I doing? It's looking under delegated tenant settings, of course. That's why it's not there. And yes, there's the Copilot setting that you can turn on as a capacity admin. So if your tenant admin doesn't like you, or you don't know who they are, a lot of places people's tenant admins are very hard to find, then as a capacity admin, you get to turn this on as well. So that's how you enable it. And I would say probably the best thing to do if you're feeling a little bit tentative is just to enable it for a group of users, not for everybody inside the organization. This will allow you to get familiar with it and start playing around with Copilot. Okay, so you then think, well, I can now just open Copilot and start playing around with it and start asking questions, and it will all just work. I hear from a lot of customers who do that, and then they're disappointed because they ask Copilot questions and it turns out that it doesn't just work, or it may not just work for their semantic models. So what we need to do now, and I think this is going to take up the majority of the live stream, is start talking about all of the things you can do to get better results from Copilot. Now, you might be one of the lucky people. You open up Copilot and it all just works. But a few things you need to be aware of. Number one thing, model design. So I've got a PBIX file here with a semantic model in it. And I'm going to use this for all of my demos. And it's worth pointing out, before we get on to anything Copilot specific, there are a couple of things that you need to be aware of with your model design, which are general best practices anyway, but they are really, really important for Copilot. What have we got here? Well, first of all, we've got a dimensional model. We've got a star scheme. We all know that Power BI likes star schemas. Not everybody has a star schema, and not everybody has a good, clean model. Secondly, we have human readable names. Now, this is maybe a little bit controversial, but this is one of my favorite topics to argue with people about. Fairly recently, somebody messaged me, I can't remember who, somebody within Microsoft, and they kind of said, Chris, what's your attitude on kind of naming conventions for a semantic model? Because somebody from some big consultancy had come in and looked at their semantic model and said, well, your dimensions should always be prefixed by dim and your fact tables should be prefixed by fact. I said, no. That is absolutely the wrong thing to do. Because, I mean, I always say you should think about your semantic model as being like a user interface. From a database point of view, yes, naming conventions are great. But a semantic model is not really a database. It doesn't play by those rules. It's something that, is a window on your data for an end user. It's a user interface. And as a result, you need to have human readable names, because these are the things that people are going to be, somebody building a report, these are the things that people are going to see. So, look, I've got spaces instead of underscores. I've got, kind of proper case. I've got
please do those things, like
vowels.
Underscores or camel case is just it's so not readable, but so many database developers build stuff that's like it's a Campbell like design, like no, it's like, yes, you need a database structure for performance, but you still need a readable data pane.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure there are going to be comments and questions about just this point, but I am 100% sure that I am right on this. The thing I always say is, if you're thinking about good semantic model design, what you should be able to do is to sit any business analyst who knows the data down in front of your semantic model, either with a live connection from Power BI Desktop or from Excel with a pivot table and analyze in Excel. And they should be able to look at what you've done and drag and drop columns and measures and things to build a visual or a pivot table and understand what the columns and tables and the measures all mean based on the names. And what's more, they should be able to do that, should be able to build a visual or pivot table, and they should not be embarrassed by the names they see there. They should not feel the need in their visual to go and rename columns and things, because that's not what their end users see. You should be able to drag a measure called order amount onto a visual and not have to rename it because it looks ugly or it's got an underscore in. I mean, who wants to see a report with a column name which has got an underscore in? Nobody wants that. You wouldn't ever do that in the real world. So why would you ever expect a semantic model to have anything with an underscore in the name?
Agreed.
So use human readable terms, use the right business terminology as well. Don't make things
I
up.
just want to jump in really quick to say I 100% agree. And I think if you really want a naming convention, you have one here, which is singular names for the dimensions, plural for the facts. And then you have your naming convention, it's still human readable. I think it's that simple. I agree with you more, Chris.
Exactly. The other key thing to mention here is that I have hidden things. Primary keys, foreign keys, columns that have been used in explicit measures. I have hidden all of the things that you would never want to see displayed in a visual anywhere. So hiding those things is good practice. It adds to readability. The advantage of this for Copilot is that it basically tells Copilot, you will never generate an answer based on one of these columns, because you never want Copilot to look at a key column. It's not useful for Copilot. Copilot is all about answering questions about your data. So it's never going to need to see a key column ever at all. Now, hiding columns that you don't want is important. There's an extra consideration as well for Copilot. If you've got a fairly complicated semantic model, there may be things that are visible in the semantic model, but which you don't want Copilot to be able to see or do anything with.
Yeah.
And this is where we kind of come to a very important button, which is this prep data for AI button here. And if I click on this, there's going to be lots of stuff to show in here going forward. The first thing to show is this simplify the data schema button. This allows you to select or deselect the things that you don't want Copilot to use in its answers. Now you'll see things have been deselected here already. These are the things which have been hidden by me. But if there are things that are visible that you also don't want Copilot to see, you can deselect those here as well. So that's model design. Now, the question I usually get at this point is, oh yeah, Chris, I really agree with you with all of these things, but when I was building my semantic model, it was when I didn't really know Power BI very well, and I was a bit of a rush, and I didn't have time to follow all of those best practices. Can I still use Copilot on that semantic model? And yeah, the answer is kind of yes, you will be able to. There are going to be things you can work around, for example, with the AI instructions feature that you'll see later. But really, you're just going to make life very hard for yourself. In that type of situation, if you've got a kind of messy semantic model, what I would say is think about creating a copy of it specifically for any testing you're doing with Copilot. Because, I think at this stage, in this stage of the process, you're probably only going to be doing some testing and learning Copilot and maybe showing the results to a couple of key stakeholders. So rather than starting with your real production semantic model, which may or may not be a bit messy, create a copy of it, go back, follow all the best practices, and then start playing around with Copilot and doing the Copilot tuning that we'll talk about in a moment. That's the way to make life easier. And then when you find out that Copilot is really great and everybody wants to use it, that's when you have the challenge of going back and refactoring your existing real semantic model.
Yeah, I would fully agree on that. Just with any of these LLM type tools, make sure to either have it in it. Well, the best thing is to have Git integration, but at a minimum, just work off of a copy that you can revert back to. I will say the trick that I like about TimberView, just to have a small plugin like on that, is just if you are doing Copilot for model changes at any point, you can version your model really easily with just dragging the model into there, and then you can revert back to it super quickly, all within the file. It's a nice little trick.
Yeah, absolutely. I love Tyndall View. It's got so many useful little advantages like this.
Yeah.
So start with a nice, clean, well-designed semantic model, and then you can start asking some questions. I'm not sure where that noise came from.
I have no idea. Like it sounded like a very weird laugh.
Yes.
Or something. Okay, yeah. So you're hearing it too. Like we were wondering who it was from, but that was. We can continue. I feel like it's a few days past Halloween for Halloween creepy laughs to be appearing onto the.
Cool. So yes. All right. So now you're ready to go, and we'll talk about monitoring and how much it costs later, because I know people are concerned about that. But where can you use Copilot? What can you do with it? Probably the first thing that I want to show is not what most people think of with Copilot, because most people think Copilot is answering data questions. And yes, we'll spend a lot of time talking about that. But it is worth pointing out that Copilot exists in DAX query view. And actually, if I'm honest, I think for the kind of people who would watch a webcast like this, you might well find that Copilot in DAX query view is where you personally get the most value initially, because this is where you can write DAX queries. This is where you can write measures and add them to your semantic model. And if you're anything like me, especially with DAX queries, I mean, I write measures all the time, calculate the columns sometimes, even though it's a bit naughty. But writing DAX queries is not something you do very often. I might copy a DAX query from Performance Analyzer and paste it in here, but I don't write DAX queries very often. And that kind of means that I would have to go away and think about what's the syntax for summarized columns and things like that. Now, with Copilot here, you can actually ask it to write DAX queries. You can actually write it to ask DAX queries with measures in. You can get it to create new measures for you. So some of the things that I could do here would be to say, hey, let's click on Copilot, and then not there, but in the Copilot window, suggest some new measures and write a DAX query to show the results. The good thing about doing a session like this is that Copilot can sometimes take about, it's fairly quick today, but sometimes can take about 20 seconds or so to come up with a result. And then if you're on stage doing a session like this on your own, you're sitting around looking like an idiot. You've got to talk while the Copilot's returning its results. Here, at least, we can have a chat together while Copilots are returning. So we've got our query here, and it's suggested some measures. That looks really cool. I can click run, and there we are. We've got some measures.
And can you control click wheel just a couple of just zoom in on the there. Oh, there that works too. Yeah, either way. Perfect.
Yeah.
If it scrolls a little too fast, it gets a little bit pixelated with too many new pixels.
Cool. Yeah. So it's suggested some measures, but I mean these are fairly random ones. So what we could do here, if we open up, all right, I know what I did. I should not have done that. I forgot to keep the query. Let me just do that again. Because what I want to do is build on that. Yeah, there's a button here to say keep the query, which I forgot to click. There we go. There, keep the query. What I might want to do now is to say, well, let's build a specific measure. So I've got a measure called order amount, and I've got an employees dimension table. And maybe what I would want to do is create a new measure that looks like this. So let's create a measure that brings back the order amount for Gabby. So let me just make sure yeah, I have got just one query here. Yeah, I was worried there were two queries. Come on. All right. Create a measure that returns the order amount for the employee Gabby. Hit enter.
The funny thing is, like, I used X Studio occasionally, but I found actually myself using Studio a little bit more. I think it's nice to see and showcase the programmatic changes you can use with the query view as well to do batch changes, not simply just, I'd say most of the time when I'm in here is like analyzing a query from performance analyzer and other stuff, but actual like some batch model changes.
Exactly. I think a bit of healthy competition. Darren Gospel, who writes DAX Studio, is on my team, so it's it's different experiences, bit of competition. Make sure that DAX Studio still has to kind of like add new features to make sure it stays relevant and interesting.
Well, unless you guys ever did query timings or anything like that, this will be good for changes. But nothing in here will tell you anything about performance. Like, you're not actually seeing any query plan. You're just seeing the user scripted measures, and the structure of the visual, right?
Yeah, exactly. So here you've got this nice side-by-side view. You can see where it's added the measure, but if we scroll up, this is the new measure that's added. I mean, anybody that knows DAX will say, yeah, that's a fairly standard calculate type measure. So we will say, yeah, we will keep that, run it, and there on the right-hand side is the Gabby order amount measure. So
is it the Gabby that I'm thinking of? Just out of curiosity, that Gabby? Okay, yeah, she's lovely. Gabby. Actually, you know what is like, and just as a random anecdote, I've yet to have her on any live stream, and I feel like at some point I need to ask her to come on, because she's a wonderful to have conversations with, and I think that I'm going to write that down for later.
Absolutely. So you'll see familiar names throughout all of this. But if you're a DAX person, you might look at this and you might say, yeah, that's good, but shouldn't I be using the keep filters function here? Isn't that the right thing to do for a measure like this? And how does the keep filters function work? So I mean, I would say the advantage about this is that if you were to think, well, what's the keep filters function do? How do I use it? You would go to your favorite search engine. You would look for keep filters. You'd probably find the docs page. You'd then read the docs page, and then it would have an example. And then you'd say, well, okay, I need to apply that to my own measure, which is quite tricky. Instead, what you can do here is go to Copilot and say, explain the keep filters DAX function and how I might use it in the measures in this query. So if we hit enter here, we're not only going to get a nice explanation of keep filters, which, like I said, you'd get from the docs anyway, but what we'll also see is if we go down, look, it's now taken my Gabby order amount measure and it's used keep filters with it, so that you can see how to use it in your own measures, and it's explained in the context of your semantic model, which I think is really nice, and I think it really helps you to kind of understand how some of these DAX things work, rather than have to read an article and then do that extra bit of mental gymnastics to say, well, how do I apply it to my model?
I'm assuming it's lifting and shifting this directly. Like, if you went to learn for any of these, is it taking this from the Microsoft Learn descriptions, or like the SQL BI's separate little DAX.do or whatever?
I probably couldn't say. I would say it's definitely going to get it from the Learn docs. It might be using other sources out there on the internet. I hope it is. I mean, if people have put their resources free out there on the internet, then why shouldn't we be using them? I suppose you also want to make sure they're curated and they're not giving you bad advice.
No hallucinations in there. It's like,
yes.
it can do this thing. Like, no, it can't. Yeah.
Well, actually, going back to our topic of naming conventions, I do know that there is a demo to be shown at a major conference coming up where you will be able to ask an LLM, hey, look at the naming conventions for my model. And I know in that case, it follows my naming conventions. So it doesn't go out there and follow any bad advice you might see on the internet about naming conventions. So I suspect it's choosy. It knows who the real experts are.
Exactly.
Cool. So that's DAX query view. I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on DAX query view because it's interesting. I think it's relevant. It gets overlooked. But of course, what most people want is to say, I want to ask questions about my data. That's what I want to do. So let's delete all of those things. And let's see how we can ask questions about our data. Well, what we've got here in Power BI Desktop is a Copilot button, which if we click it, will open up a new Copilot pane on the right. And this is where we as Power BI model developers or report developers can start to play around with Copilot. Now, this is just in Power BI Desktop. You can also, of course, go to a Power BI report and open up the side pane here and view that. There are other places we will see in a moment where you can ask questions about your data. But let's start with that, taking a report, opening this Copilot side pane and starting to ask questions. Now, I'm going to do all of my demos in Power BI Desktop for the main reason that I'm going to change some stuff in the semantic model and we want to see the changes. There's another really important, interesting thing to mention about Power BI Desktop rather than the service, which is this select skills drop down here. Now, this is only available in desktop and it's a feature for testing because even in this side pane, Copilot can do a number of different things. It's got a number of different skills. And if you know that you just want to test one skill, like maybe a bit later, we will see how Copilot can create new report pages, and you want it to only ever create report pages, then you can tell Copilot in Power BI Desktop, today I only want it to create report pages. That's not possible in the service. It is possible in desktop. A few other things to point out. If we were to go up to the ellipses in the top right-hand corner, that's something that's available later, but we've got a clear chat button, which is available in the service. So if you want to clear the chat pane, you can do that. And then there's this download diagnostics file here. I'm not going to go into detail about this. You will look at it and you will think, is this documented? No, it's not documented. But you can look at it and you can understand what's going on. And it's something that I have blogged about. One of the things you will learn from it is you'll get a session history. You'll be able to see what happened behind the scenes when you were asking questions. And you'll also be able to see some of the configuration changes that you've made. So we'll talk about AI instructions a little bit later, and you'll be able to see the AI instructions that were in place when you answered a particular question, because that's not always straightforward. You'll make a change, for example, those changes may or may not be applied absolutely immediately. You'll test something, it doesn't work, and you'll think, was that because I got the AI instructions wrong, or your Copilot didn't pay attention to them, or were they just not in place when I asked this question? So the diagnostics file, if you're kind of a bit nerdy like me, you can download it, have a look. It's just a text file and shows you all kinds of other interesting things. So that's the Copilot pane. But of course, what we really want to do is to start asking some questions. And there are a number of different types of questions that we can ask here. So one of the first types of questions that I can ask is summarize the semantic model. I'm here editing a report. I might want to know what's in the semantic model because maybe I didn't build it. And if I was to ask that question, it will go away and it will give me a fairly brief summary of what's in the semantic model. So we zoom in and have a look at that. It gives the information on customers, employees, orders, and products. It's a bit vague, but we can start to ask more questions about what's in the semantic model. That's not really very important, though. What, of course, we want to do is to ask questions about data. Finally, we're going to get around to doing this. So there are a couple of different ways that Copilot can answer questions about data. In fact, there are three main ways. And it's really important to understand these three main ways and the kind of like process it uses for kind of answering questions about data. So the first way that it can answer questions about data is by looking at the report that you've got open. Because, if you're asking a question and the answer is on a report page right there in front of you, it's a good thing, to be actually pointed to the report page and being told, well, actually, the answer's right here. And, I suppose we've all seen reports with quite a lot of pages and quite a lot of visuals. And, you might not just know what's there in front of you. I can ask general questions like, what does this report page tell me?
And while that's spinning up, Jake, somebody had a question. So, does Copilot use the Q&A feature that's built into Power BI, and or can it access synonyms?
That is a very good question. I'm going to defer that to about 5 minutes time, I think. But remind me to answer that question, because it's a really important one.
I'm completely spacing on the MVP's name, but it's a good question is one I answer now, and a great question is a question that is on an upcoming slide. Okay, is answered on an upcoming slide. So it's pretty close to that. It might be Buck Woody or someone along those lines, but I really liked that quote, and I think that was kind of like, yep, that's coming up, so that's perfect.
Cool. Yeah. So you can see we've got an answer here, and it's a kind of textual summary of what's on the screen. You will see we've got these footnote type things. There is an official name, and I just totally forgotten what they are, but I'm just going to call them footnotes because they look like footnotes. And you will see that here we've got a footnote that says 1, and next to it says it's next to Apple stand out as the dominant product, accounting for 70% of total order units, significantly higher than any other product. If I hover over that tells me it's a calculated insight. That's something that it's found just by looking at everything on the screen. And all of those other ones will be the same. Now, if we go to 2, you can see we get something slightly different here. This particular insight came from a specific visual. And if I click on the footnote, it will actually spotlight the visual where it got that answer from. So when it says among product groups, citrus fruit and yellow fruit have similar order units with 27 and 26 units respectively, clicking on that says, well, I got this answer from this visual here. So these footnotes can be used to kind of help you understand where the answers came from. And, I can ask more specific questions like, how many apples did Gabby sell? It's Gabby again. And if I ask this question, can't see this on this page, but it's there on the next page. So all right, didn't like that. Let's close, and this happens, close and reopen the Copilot pane. How many apples did Gabby sell? There we go. Gabby sold 101 apples. We've got a footnote again. Click on this, and it will take me to the next page. And
the footnotes are really nice. Yeah,
it's one of those things that's easy to miss, but I think it's a really nice touch. So it's answered a question by getting a single data point, and I can do things like who are the top 2 employees based on order units. And there we are. Top 2 employees are Gabby and Benny, because like you can see, there is Gabby, there is Benny, they're the top 2 employees. So we can answer questions about data like this from the side pane. Slight diversion or digression. These types of questions can also be answered in the narrative visual. So if I was to add a narrative visual on here, a Q&A visual, but a new narrative visual, I would be able to come in and kind of ask the same type of questions as well. So we're running a little bit out of time, so I'm going to not do that. But you can answer those types of questions on there. There's tons of other stuff to come, and I'm just aware that I'm probably going a little bit too slowly. All right, so what we want to do really is to kind of do something a little bit more complicated. Now, those are all nicely structured questions, but what we need to come on to now is asking questions that were kind of like less obvious. So if I was to say something like this, so let's pretend that we work for Fruity Farms and there is some very, very specific type of analysis that we want to do called a Webb havens analysis.
Nice.
For analyzing fruit sales. I'm going to tell Copilot, go away and do a Webb havens analysis. How does Copilot know what a Webb havens analysis is? Right, spoiler, I've just completely made that up. There is no such, surprisingly, there is no such thing as a Webb havens analysis. You have to be quite careful here because you can pick some fairly random names, and it turns out there are actually real things called these analyses, but genuinely nothing called a Webb havens analysis. So we've got to tell Copilot what a Webb havens analysis is. This is our first example of where we've actually got to do some tuning. Now, how can we do this? Let's say in this particular case that this is a Webb havens analysis. This particular visual represents a Webb havens analysis. So the easiest way to kind of tell Copilot what a Webb havens analysis is to say, well, actually, it is this visual. So what I can do is I can click on the visual and set up a verified answer. And if I do that, the prep data for AI pane pops up again. And I can say that this is a Webb havens analysis. I'm going to add it and I'm going to click apply. You've got to remember to click apply before you click close. And then whenever you do any change like this, always a good idea to close and reopen the Copilot pane. This creates a new session. And then now when I say, give me a Webb havens analysis, what we will find is that it will pick up that verified answer and it's going to go straight to that visual.
That's cool.
There you are.
I like the navigation experience and the integrated charts is quite nice. It's slick. Does out of curiosity, does the scroll bar work?
In here, yes. And of course,
nice. Okay.
I can expand that out as well.
Yeah,
see that.
that's
and
cool.
I've got, because I'm in edit mode in desktop, I could add this to a page as well, but it's already on the page. So verified answers are the easy way. If you know that somebody's going to ask a very specific question and you've got a visual that answers that question, just take them directly to that visual. Sometimes it's quite easy to do that because, the visual matches what people are asking for. But in this case, where there's some very specific term, set a verified answer. Okay. Next, we need to start talking about questions whose answer is not on the report, but which could be got from the semantic model. There are two ways that Copilot can answer this type of data question. It can build a Power BI visual, which is going to do most of the time, or in the kind of worst case scenario, it will go away and generate a DAX query, in which case you'll just see a table of data, which is the result of the DAX query. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask some questions whose answer is not on the report, but which can be got from the semantic model. And we need to talk about how we can tune these things as well. Now, first of all, what I will do is I will start with a question, which is a very nicely structured, very clear question, which will be show number of orders by employee. All of my visuals on the report page use the order units measure, and they all kind of look at, some of them look at products and some of them look at employees, but number of orders is not something that's displayed. There is an order count measure, and this is the one that I want to use. Now, hopefully, what we'll see is the response says, I can't get this from the report page. I'm going to go to the semantic model.
From all of the little the kind of the UI added bonuses and stuff from the navigation, because there's a lot of different like links and items. What's your kind of like favorite little nice like icing on the cake that this does?
Well, since you asked, let's have a look at how Copilot arrived at this. So this is something that you'll see in a lot of cases. We saw it up here with a verified answer, but here I think this is where it starts to be really useful. So we've got an answer. It's given me a little text description. The reason we know that it's gone to the semantic model is that it's actually built a visual for me. And this is a visual that's not anywhere on the report page. But if you're wondering what's in this visual, you click on how Copilot arrived at this. And this is where you can see employee name, order count. These are the things that you would have dragged into the visual if you were building it yourself. Again, you can pop out, you see that. And again, I could just add this to the page. There we go. I've got that as well. I can only do that here because I'm editing the report. If I was an end user, I wouldn't have that option. If I was an end user in the service, I would have the option to use the explore feature to explore the data because I probably wouldn't have the opportunity to edit the report.
Yep.
So that's a fairly straightforward question to answer. Again, let's ask a question that's got absolutely no way of knowing the answer to. So again, kind of similar to our Webb havens analysis, I'm going to say show VOLFR by employee. Now, what does VOLFR mean? Let's pretend in our organization it's kind of short for volume fruit, which everybody who farms fruit knows is the standard industry term for like order count or something like that. But Copilot doesn't know that because it doesn't know anything about our specific business and all the terminology that we use. So if I was to say show vol-fr by employee, kind of like, if you asked anybody in the street, what does vol-fr mean? They're not going to know. So when it does come back, it's going to probably say, hold on, can you tell me what this means? Now, we could just go and tell Copilot what this means, but you don't want end users to have to go away and keep answering these types of questions. If they know what vol-fr is, you've got to go and like tell it. So like you can see here in the response, it's actually done a pretty good response. It says it doesn't know what it means, but did you mean this? Did you mean this? And it's got a couple of pills that you can actually select to say, show order count by employee. That's the right answer. But we want this to just work. So,
well, the thing that's good with this is it's a bit of a. Sorry, go ahead, Steve. Oh, I thought you were serious talk. So the I was it's a good canary in the coal mine because it's you know it's a great way to make sure that you can not just ask it any question and it will try to invent an answer for you. So it's a nice bit of reassurance of like, no. Like if I don't know something, I will tell you I don't know something. I will say there's a little bit, I would assume maybe a bit of a difference between Copilot and say like a regular GPT or Gemini or a few others, which have a tendency to be more of the yes people. Because when you're trying to make more of an enterprise type thing, I would imagine there's some extra guardrails that Microsoft has layered on top to you are not allowed to answer things that you do not have data-driven context for or something.
Yeah, it's difficult because you do want Copilot to at least make some assumptions and not be totally strict. But at the same time, if I said, show order count by employee, and actually I've got a field called employee name, you wanted to assume that employee means employee name. You don't want Copilot to say, hey, do you mean employee name rather than employee? Because yeah, of course you do. It turns out to be really quite hard to know where to draw that line. But we've had a lot of feedback, I think, over the past year or so from customers to say, please be more cautious about these types of things.
Exactly. So, yep.
What we need to do now is we need to tell Copilot that vol_for is order count. This is where we get to answer Jake's question, because this is what you might call a synonym. Vol_for is another term for order count. So where do we do this? Now, there are a couple of different places that you can do this. If you were watching me doing a Copilot presentation from 6 months to a year ago, you would have seen me open up the Q&A setup dialog. And in the Q&A setup dialog, which is a feature for kind of like the Stone Age Copilot feature, which was Q&A that was around a long time ago. That's a nice dialogue where you can set up things like synonyms, where you can do things like relationships and stuff. Now, synonyms that you set up in the Q&A setup dialog, they are honored by Copilot, but I do not want you to use the Q&A setup dialog from now on for reasons.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, but don't think about the Q&A setup dialog. You can also, if you were to select the order count measure here, there is a synonyms box here where you can set up a synonym for a measure and set that there outside the Q&A dialog. That's perfectly okay. We don't want to stop you from doing that. That's probably a good place to set up a synonym. Another thing you can do, though, is if you go to Home and again click on Prep Data for AI, you can go to Add AI Instructions, where you get this big empty box, and this is where you can add instructions for Copilot. And what I can do here is say something like vol_for means the order count measure. And I'm going to click apply and click close. And you'll see there's a kind of warning up here. I need to close and reopen the Copilot pane. And now, when I say show vol_for by employee, it should, fingers crossed, I'm sure it will. And you can see actually in this case, it's going and generating a DAX query. I think I know why it might be doing that, but yeah, we've got the result we wanted, which is employee name by vol_for. Now, this is a kind of happy accident. Normally, it will only generate DAX queries where it's a little bit more complex. I think I know what's going on here. And if I was to wait like 5 more minutes, it probably wouldn't generate the DAX query. But it's nice to show a scenario where a DAX query is generated, because when it's generated the DAX query, you can click here and you can actually see the DAX query that's been generated. And you don't have to know much DAX to
so a thing that I've found that's useful for I found some things useful for generating those instructions is like I use Claude specifically for this to go back to Power BI because it has some MCPs for like local files and stuff. But it has if you feed it the whole PBIP, it gives it it can look at the model and it can look at the report layer and like, all right, give me a set of rules that would be useful for Copilot to be able to answer questions given the whole context of what you see here as some further instructions that might help with prompting and stuff. And knowing the holistic, like how the model is structured, but how it's used in visuals and pages and like with names, sometimes gives a few extra like, oh, I hadn't thought like X and Y like would be this instruction, but yeah, that makes sense. So it's good at writing instructions for it itself sometimes if you give it certain context as a bit of a time saver.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's definitely a lot of value in that. But again, does Claude know these obscure terms that are only in use in your business? Possibly not. So you do need to do some manual work here as well.
Oh no, of course, yeah. I would not paste it de facto. I would use that to like it's you don't know what you don't know. So it's sometimes like other little, oh, I hadn't thought of that, but yes, that would let me rephrase that because you found something that's confusing to you. Like, and you can even ask it that a little bit. Is like, is there anything that you see in here like you don't understand why this is there in this visual doing this thing? It's like, oh yeah, well that's a certain business requirement. So like maybe I should provide context for that when talking to Copilot. Yep, agreed.
Absolutely. But I mean, you can put well, not absolutely anything in here, but you can put lots and lots of things in here. And I would say there is another 2 hours of me going on about all the different things that you can put in the AI instructions. It's probably worth saying what you can't put in the AI instructions. You can't, for example, say always answer questions with DAX queries. You can't force it to use a particular skill or force it to use a particular method for answering questions. That's not possible here. But, the kind of things you can do here, apart from defining synonyms, perhaps in my farm, we've got employees, we've got customers. It's the customers who pick the fruit. And you could say, well, it's customers who pick fruit rather than employees. And if you were to say who picked lemons, an AI instruction could be saying, well, you're asking who picked lemons, but that's going to be a customer, not an employee. Those types of things. Another really important thing that I find that I want to add all the time is, responses should always include, quite often should always include a dimension, and usually that's always time. So if I was to say show order count, well, pretty much no Power BI visual would ever not be filtered by a year, a quarter, a month, or a date or something. Showing order count for whatever arbitrary time range you happen to have in your semantic model is not a useful number, but it's exactly the kind of thing an end user would do. They would absolutely say show order count without thinking, do you mean order count for this year or the year to date or everything like that? So you can add instructions here, like, if the user forgets to ask or specify something on the date dimension table, tell them, don't answer the question, tell them that they absolutely have to specify a year or quarter, a month or something like that. But yeah, I've got tons and tons of blog posts about this from the summer. These are mostly kind of ideas that I had that I tested. So go away and see what works with your semantic model. But there are tons and tons of other things.
I'll make sure to do a quick drop for the cross-join blog post, of course.
Cool. And then last thing you can do here in the Copilot side pane is you can actually create new report pages. And this is something that has actually in the latest version of Power BI Desktop has got a few extra capabilities. I will first of all show something that Copilot has been able to do for a good couple of months. If I was to say create a new page showing order amount broken down by employee with a slicer for products, I can get it to go away and build a brand new report page for me. And there's the new report page, and there's the header, and there is the product slicer. And there we are, order amount by employee name. And there's some other useful stuff that you probably would want to have on here. Yeah. order units, order amount. I mean, not the most beautiful report page in the world, but it's respectable. It's probably about as good as I can do because I'm visually challenged. And yeah, I mean, it's a good start for somebody who's new to Power BI. So yeah, it's done that for me, and that's got a lot better. These pages used to be really, really ugly, and now it's kind of plain bland, but it's good. You can do things like let's add a pie chart. So let's add a pie chart showing order count by product on the bottom. This is new. Copilot didn't used to be able to add new visuals onto the page, but it can do this now.
And once you have a sec to have a quick, after it finishes with the report page, I missed a question from Jake that I'll bring up about the context prompting to give to Copilot. Actually, I guess just why that's loading. So would Markdown or any other format other than pure text be better for providing more concise instructions? So I'll give a little extra context. So like other tools, I know project instructions, I think in Claude, in my universe, is it, whenever I've asked it to write instructions, it often recommends Markdown because it helps it to separate that for itself better. So I don't know if there is in the Copilot instructions, or is it meant for just English from business users?
I think this is a very interesting question, one that I was having a conversation about today. If you compare Copilot with data agents in Fabric, the advice is very clear, use Markdown. I think, for the point of view of Power BI Copilot, Markdown is probably a good compromise between kind of readability and having some kind of structure there. So I'm going to say, personally, I think Markdown is a good idea, but, plain text is probably fine as well.
Okay. Yeah. So it sounds like an either or. It will be able to interpret through it, but maybe not JSON.
Exactly. I mean, most people who are doing kind of serious work do tend to use Markdown in AI instructions, and works pretty well. Last thing to show here is that I've got a pie chart, and obviously we don't like pie charts, do we? So what we can do is say, change the pie chart to a column chart. This is also something new. You can also say, change the pie chart to another visual that follows visualization best practices as well. And it will do that. But in this case, I'm going to say, change it to a column chart. And
assuming, would you be able to put these in the instructions for your Copilot to never use pie charts?
Yes, you can, actually. I've tested that, and I've got a blog post on it. I think that might really irritate your end users. They've suddenly started to have opinions. Oh, yeah. And in this case, it said you can't change it. But yes, I do want it to remove it and replace it. So it's going to remove it and replace it, and with a new visual. There you are, it's removed it. I think when you change one visual type to another, that's when it starts to get a little bit worried. Because I mean, in some cases you can just click on a visual, change the visual type. But then, if you've done this manually in Power BI, you know that sometimes the thing, the fields get put in the wrong wells, and it doesn't always look all that good. But yeah, here we are. Yep. It's built a column chart by removing the pie chart and building something brand new. So I think this is really nice. And yeah, it's not quite as cool as all of those demos you'll see online with generating Power BI reports from scratch, but it's beginning to get there, I think.
It's got a long way, I'd say, even in the last like 8 months with some of this stuff for sure, as it's continued to mature.
Yeah, exactly. Now, 2 more last things to show, because I know we're kind of like well over the hour, but yeah, we're not particularly time constrained.
Oh, you're good. Yeah, exactly.
We've talked about writing questions in the report pane. There are other places you can ask questions. So something that is pretty new is that if you've got an app and I build an app with my report in, I've got a regular app. I can now have Copilot available in that app. And I can say things like, well, show number of orders by employee again. And there we go. And this will be scoped just to the reports and the semantic models that are there only in the app. Now, it says it's found several items that can answer my question, even though there's only one. I'm going to click this button here that says use that particular semantic model. And it's going to go away and answer that question just from the semantic models and reports that are there scoped in the app. So you can ask a question like this in an app. You've also got this thing called standalone Copilot. Standalone Copilot is available here from the kind of Power BI homepage. I go to home, I can go to click standalone Copilot. This is one of those things that does need to be enabled separately. So if I go to tenant settings again, you've got standalone Copilot. So yes, users can access standalone Copilot. And this is where, without knowing which semantic model or which report to use, I can start to ask questions about all the data that I've got in Power BI. So what are the types of things that I could do here? Well, where do I start? I know roughly what I want to do. So where can I learn about sales for fruity farms? So this is where it goes away and finds that actually I've got multiple pretty much identical semantic models because I've published lots of these. But how does it rank? How does it know which ones that I want to use here? So the one I wanted is at the top of the screen. A couple of things borne in mind. It knows which reports I've looked at most recently. So this was opened 5 hours ago. Okay, that's probably a good sign. You can see that I've favorited this report. So that's also a good sign that I want to use this. Now, this report is prepped for AI, and this is quite an important thing. We might want to go back to here. So here's the workspace, here's the semantic model. If I was to go to settings, there is this prepped for AI box that I've checked here. So this indicates that I've done all the hard work to make sure this model has been prepped for AI. And this means that this model is going to be preferred in search results to any model that hasn't been prepped for AI. And then also you'll see up here in the description, I have taken the time to add a description to say, hey, this contains sales data for fruity farms. So if I was to say, hey, where can I learn about sales data for fruity farms? This description is one of the number of things that's taken into account. So set descriptions, that's going to help a lot. But if we go back here, you can say, yes, I want to use the #1 search result here. And it says, yeah, I can indeed ask questions about sales data for fruity farms. It's quite helpful. And I could say things like, yes, again, show number of orders by employee. And it will give me an answer. So, if you're rolling out Copilot for the entire organization and you want anybody to be able to ask any question, standalone Copilot is really interesting. You don't want people to have to know which report or which semantic model to go to or to go directly to there. You can just use standalone Copilot, start asking questions, and it will guide you to the right place, and then you can start to ask questions from there. But all of this metadata that you may or may not have bothered to set, like prep data for AI, descriptions. It'll also look and see things like text boxes on the report. These are all things taken into account as well. Setting all of those descriptions can really, really help Copilot, standalone Copilot, find the right semantic model.
Well, I have one question actually from the Raven field, I guess, that I wanted just to bring up. So I know you're on like more of the Copilot perspective that can produce visuals that can take you to the pages. You're in. I'm going to interpret this as if you're looking at a report, you'll be at the report viewer role. Is there any Copilot features when you're on a page like that, or do you have to come more to like the Copilot window itself?
Well, I mean, the standalone Copilot is for report viewers. So a report viewer can use standalone Copilot and they can do all the things they can do here. Somebody who's only got access to an app can use Copilot and do those things here. And, here is my report. It's not in edit mode. I've still got the Copilot pane. I can ask data questions. The things that you can only do in edit mode are the things like add a new report page, change visuals, and all of those things. If you want to ask questions about the data, a report viewer can do that.
Nice, excellent. Back off. There we go.
Cool. The last thing maybe to talk about is how much does this cost? Because that people are always worried about cost with Copilot. Copilot is like anything else in Power BI and Fabric. It just consumes CUs on your capacity. So, people are kind of quite rightly worried about, end users getting a little bit too enthusiastic with Copilot and asking lots of questions and then maxing out your capacity. You can see Copilot usage in the Capacity Metrics app. So if you were to go to, I like this new item history page here in the Capacity Metrics app, partly because you can actually filter it by workspace name or item name, or indeed, in this case, operation name. And Copilot and Fabric is the operation name for Copilot. So if you only want to see usage for Copilot, you can go here onto the item history pane.
Yeah.
You can view it in a number of different ways. You've also got the chargeback report, and the chargeback report as well, which if you install it, you can filter by operation name as well. So this gives you a good idea of how many CUs people are using on Copilot, and this will give you, some useful information for sites as well. Probably the very last thing to say about this, and going back to the admin portal, is that you still might be worried about people overloading your capacity with Copilot. There is also this feature called Fabric Copilot Capacities, which is enabled here in the tenant settings. And what this allows you to do is to set up a capacity as something called a Copilot capacity, which means that your end users, regardless of where the model is, whether it's on another capacity or whether it's even in a kind of pro workspace, all their Copilot usage can be diverted to a single capacity, a Copilot capacity. So you can turn this on here, and then you can go to your capacities, choose a capacity. Let's choose this one. And you can then turn this on, enable this as a Copilot capacity. So, if everybody suddenly starts playing around with Copilot and asking lots of questions, all that's going to happen is all of their usage is going to be diverted to this capacity, not the one that you use for your reports and your semantic models or your ETL or anything like that. So if the capacity gets overloaded, it's only going to be Copilot that suffers. So you can effectively kind of ring fence all of your Copilot usage onto a separate capacity.
I've heard of that as commonly recommended as a good practice, just to prevent the noisy neighbors syndrome, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that was a whistle-stop tour of all of the kind of cool things you can do with Copilot, and it barely scratched the surface. There's tons and tons of other stuff we can talk about. But yeah, I mean, it's a hugely exciting area. I would say, a lot of the customers that I'm working with who have taken the time to build nice semantic models and tune AI instructions are already getting some very, very impressive results. So, please turn it on, play around with it, but also remember it might not just work. You've got to have a nice clean model, you've got to have AI instructions, you've got to have all of these other things. So do those things, and I guarantee you'll be pleasantly surprised with the kind of results you get from Copilot. And we're adding new features all the time. There are going to be lots of new features coming soon, and that will just make things even better.
Yeah, out of everything that you've shown, is there any of the, or a handful of the Copilots that you use more on a daily basis than others, or just more frequently than others, out of curiosity?
Actually, standalone Copilot. So putting aside me as a person who builds semantic models, or me as somebody who does demos and things like that. Obviously, inside Microsoft, we use Copilot. We use Power BI very, very heavily. There's like tons of reports that I've got access to that allow me to see what individual customers are doing, all of those different things you'd expect we'd have. So all of our reporting in BI is done with Copilot. And what I find is that I see so many interesting reports, and I favorite them, but then I still can't remember what's going on. And I'll give you an example. The other day I was searching for something because I remember seeing a particular funnel chart which showed a particular metric, but I could not for the life of me remember which report that was on. So I went to standalone Copilot and I said, can you find the report which had a funnel chart on that showed roughly this?
Okay.
And standalone Copilot and Copilot Search there found the visual for me and took me directly to that report, which I thought, okay, that is genuinely useful, because we've all been there. And I think in large organizations, you get access to so many reports. Even with favoriting, it can be sometimes quite hard to kind of keep track of where all the things you've seen are. And that standalone Copilot it's really quite impressive, just as a way of like searching for stuff.
I like, I think to your point of, I didn't realize it could actually like go and find particular items via the metadata, but that can be interesting to go find the needle in the haystack, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that idea.
We'll see a lot of people, as you said, probably, as you mentioned earlier, your blog posts weren't as viewed as you thought with Copilot. I feel everyone's still figuring it out. We're not quite sure those really cool, useful features that just come with maturity, right? So I think there's a lot of cool stuff. I'm excited to dig in. Yeah, definitely a lot to learn.
Well, I mean, trust me, I'm figuring out it as well. It's just I'm writing it down and sharing it while I figure it out. Nobody, the thing about these things is that people often think that there's some, clever people behind the scenes at Microsoft who automatically know how all these things work. But no, we're building it, and then we're figuring out how it works and what the best practices are on the go. So that's why I love working with customers. It kind of, you learn as much from customers as you teach them.
Exactly. I think as we come up, one thing that I always like to ask the presenters is any final takeaways, notes, words of wisdom, or any supplemental links or things for people to check out to continue to explore, kind of follow up with this on their own as they poke around with it.
Well, read the docs. The docs are actually very, very detailed.
Yep.
And there are, there's a lot of really good, slightly obscure stuff that's going on in the docs. I mean, one of the things that I've been writing about recently is how Copilot indexes strings, text values. Because if I was to say, show me sales for apples, how does Copilot know that apples is a product? Maybe a better example. If I was to say, show me sales for West, how does it know West is a region rather than a surname or a product name or a customer name or something like that? Copilot knows that because it goes through all of the text columns in your semantic model, apart from the ones that you've hidden or disabled or deselected in the schema view, and it builds a text index. And it uses that to help it answer questions. But on a big model, building that index could take quite a long time. And sometimes people publish, and it could take a couple of minutes for the text index to build after you've published. But you go in and you start testing immediately, and it's like, oh well, this isn't working very well. This worked fine in desktop, doesn't work in the service. Then you come back a couple of minutes later, and suddenly it's all working again because the text index has been built. This was something that we heard a lot from customers. But there is actually a really good section in the docs now covering that, talking about how it, what it does, how it gets built, how long it might take, and all of these other different things. So take the time to go through all the docs. There's a surprising amount of detail.
Yeah, it's good to know that they've continued to be up to. Every once in a while, I'll see one that's out of date, but it's I think with this stuff, it's good to stay at the forefront of making sure they remain updated. I'll do one last question from Jake, and then I think we can wrap up. So, does Fabric Copilot have any extra training for Fabric-specific features like the DAX UDF as examples?
This is a blog post I've yet to write. I have not tested this myself, but I do know a customer that has tested it, and they have assured me that yes, you have DAX UDFs defined. You can, in your AI instructions, give it instructions to say that this DAX UDF exists, it does this, and if you can go away and use it, because we've seen Copilot can go away and write DAX queries, and I've got a blog post from a month or so ago showing how you can give it query templates or measure templates, fragments of DAX to say, well, here's how you solve a particular problem in DAX. Go away and alter this template to go and based on the user's prompt. And DAX UDFs are the same thing. You can tell it that DAX UDFs exist and what those DAX UDFs do and what they should be used for. And yeah, you can apparently, even though I've not tested it yet, get it to go away and generate DAX queries that use the UDF. I should probably
you just gotta give it
write
gotta give it context.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. Go for it. Overall, I, as always, appreciate you coming on, sharing stuff like this. I certainly learned a couple of new things. I haven't, some of the UIs for Copilot I hadn't looked at very recently, or maybe in the last couple of months, and even some new icons and some other stuff are starting to show up. So it's nice to see the agile iterations that this stuff is going through for that. So this has been very useful. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, cool. Very useful.
Thank you.
Perfect. I think with that, I'll, we're at the top of the hour now, so I'll wish you well, and looking forward to getting you back on here and again in the future for another topic.
Come back in a year or two and we'll show Clippy building Power BI reports for you. I guess.
See, we're one little tile, so there you go. Perfect.
Well, yeah, I think we probably heard enough about AI already for today.
Exactly. Got to put a coin in the jar every time you say Copilot or AI on the stream.
Yeah.
But yeah, have a great rest of your evening now. And then otherwise, we look forward to getting you on again. And then everyone else is tuning in. Have a great morning, afternoon, evening, night, or weekend. And we'll see you online on our next stream.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.
All right. Bye-bye.
Cool.